So let's talk gaming. I don't mean video gaming like Fortnite, Call of Duty, but I guess kinda. Also a little bit of chess, maybe Go strategy. Really wargaming. So essentially, pretty much all the branches have doubled down on simulations and synthetic training environments. And for the layman, that's kind of a lot like gaming, but not exactly. So a lot of the wargaming systems that they're using now have a combination of factors. So they'll use actual kind of like role-playing, first-person, move through the terrain type of features, such as virtual battle space 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 being the most recent version. The Marines have just adopted that. The Army's still on version 3, but I think they're upgrading. Those are pretty much what you would see in the role-player type, first-person shooter type games. However, you have a lot more options with technology. Those are out there now. They're being developed and have been used for decades now in the military. Getting better each year, getting better each time. They do different upgrades for software, different upgrades for capabilities and additions. So in the last few years, the Army put together its cross-functional team synthetic training environment. Now, that's a whole different focus beyond the typical programs that develop equipment or software or programs. It's a whole team dedicated to figuring out how they're going to train people, whether it's driving a Humvee, shooting a new weapon system, or figuring out how to do a tactical type of or operational strategic type of war game. And that team is basically adapting all those technologies to live virtual constructed events, which means you have elements of the team out there actually in the field, with gear, with sensors, shooting at each other with blanks, practicing actual maneuvers, while in a battle space, say a command post or some type of C2 operation, they're actually viewing the entire battle space, simulating effects as far as, say, drones, electronic warfare, cyber attacks, weather issues such as dust storms. Those are all being simulated through those centers, and then they're getting feedback from what's happening out in the field, and it's the live and virtual and constructed, so it's all kind of built together. Now that's what the STE team is going after on the Army side. Now on the Marine Corps side, about 4 years ago, the Commandant at the time announced a Wargaming and Analysis Center at the Marine Corps headquarters at Quantico, Virginia. That broke ground this past year and is scheduled to open in the next couple years. They've just signed on to get software developed for that Wargaming Center. And the same company that makes the virtual battle space that's been used for a couple decades, Bohemia Interactive Solutions, is developing software for the Wargaming Center. And it's pretty much going to digest all the known data, all the intel about China, about Russia, about Iran, and develop opposing or adversary forces that they can then run thousands upon thousands of algorithms through to see what the Marine Corps needs to fight those types of fights, like what equipment will work best, what kind of ranges they can fight at, what communication systems they're going to have in those spaces that might be vulnerable and what they can do to protect them. It pretty much takes all those things and jams them into one program so that they can figure out what best to do in the next fight, how to build and prepare the force in the coming years to better fight that potential or anticipated fight. Military Times recently spoke with Bohemia Interactive Solutions. They're the ones that make VBS and are working on the Wargaming Center and programs for the Army. And they talked about the level of detail that they've had to develop and have been able to expand upon since they came out with their first version almost 2 decades ago. Essentially, they can get down to the level of detail where they can figure out how the tires on a Humvee will react to a certain type of sand in, say, a central command type battle space scenario. So well, is this sand issue or these other types of maybe a weather issue such as a dust storm or a rainstorm going to affect my movement from one location to the next? At the same time, some detail is kind of superfluous. Like, they don't need to study all the physics of how water moves around to make a wake for a ship just so that you see a beautiful wake for a ship on the video game. But they do need to do things like understand how smoke's going to come out of an artillery tube so that artillerymen using that specific software will know how the wind is drifting, how the wind might affect their fire, and adjust fire in the game as though they would really do that on a firing line or on a gun line in the real world. Kind of the backbone to all of these simulations that really the STE team on the Army side and all the other programs that are using these simulations are looking towards and looking forward to is the development of a thing called One World Terrain. Now, for the longest time, they pretty much had to build from scratch the terrain features that they wanted, whether it was an urban environment, a desert or a jungle, something out to sea. Now what they're doing is taking and mapping entire areas of the globe via satellite, via drones, pulling all that data in and creating real-world, almost real-time mapping in the games. Think of a Google Earth, but even more accurate, and also including sensitive information that you couldn't get in an unclassified situation. By taking that together, putting that software into one system, everyone can be on the same common operating picture, working on the same terrain, and the terrain can be adjusted. So if I'm shooting at enemy forces and some of my rounds miss and create craters in the ground, and the next force comes through that, the craters are there on the virtual version of the real world scenario, so you're dealing with actual battle damage effects and battle damage assessments that you would see if you were doing an actual fire in the real world. So for old guys like me, probably not going to see a lot anymore of the cigarette carton, cigarette pack, or MRE boxes on a sand table making up a kind of an ad hoc terrain map for your next assault on an urban objective. Now you're going to have devices such as tablets that are going to give you those, maybe virtuality goggles that they're developing, so you can see around the terrain and see what the simulated portions and augmented reality or virtual portions would be that you're communicating with the command post about. You can still see the effects, you can still have the communication, you can still have the objective there in front of you and be able to use the technology at hand to better improve the training and tactical proficiency. And just a few years ago, Military Times reported on Marines down at Camp Lejeune that kind of cobbled together their own way of doing virtual training in the barracks. They basically got some salvaged computers to put together with some software, took their drones out, scanned some areas, pulled that data in, created their own training environment, and then used that to run different scenarios for fire team and squad level rushes and attacks. So they were able to basically do their own kind of virtual sand table right there in the barracks. And it's kind of a wonder what Marines can do if you give them too much time. And while live training is probably the best way to do any kind of training, actually get your hands on equipment, get out in the field, see how things move, there are things you can't do in live training. Like here in the continental United States, you really can't do a lot of electronic warfare attacks. It's hard to do certain types of cyber attacks. But with virtual and constructed areas available, basically trainers can take those kind of simulated effects and apply them and put them into a war game, so you're out there and suddenly your comms go down, or you're being jammed, or you're having degraded communications, or a cyber attack takes out all your links and you have to operate alone in the dark with no communications. Those types of situations are harder to do in a field training environment now, but with augmented, virtual, and different type of live and constructed scenarios, they can be added into training for a more realistic effect for what Marines, soldiers, sailors, and airmen might face down range in the field. And for Military Times on Defense News Weekly, this is Todd South.